let's start by what is this talk all about, and mainly what it's not about. So today it's only a sneak peek, as the title says. I'm going to show you a very high overview over our developer tools. And I want to show the problems that we have and the solutions and tools that we developed. It will be high-level overview because we're planning to have a series of meetups. And hopefully in next meetups we'll have a deeper dive into some of the tools. I don't have a lot of slides. I don't like slides. It will be mainly demo. So I'll open my IDE and my terminal and show a demo. This will be most of the talk. But first I want to talk a little bit about the problems that we have and about some solutions. So challenges that we had. First of all, we have hundreds of front-end developers. We have more than 700 front-end developers. This is huge. We have a huge code base, and we had very long builds. I remember a few years ago that we have a lot of dependencies, and it was a mess. You had to wait even hours for other builds to end until your build will run. And also deployments were huge with a lot of changes. And every time that we deployed something, it was hard to know if something broke, what was breaking us, and deployments could take a lot of time. And these are some of the issues, of course, and some of the challenges, and also some of the solutions. One of them is we went to use micro frontends. There's a link here to an awesome post by Shachar about what we did at Wix for micro frontends. And basically, we break our huge monolith to small applications. As Yoav said before, each application is a company. Each small application inside this micro frontend is a different company, which brings a lot of challenges, which we'll see soon. It will let us build and test separately. So each company can build and test its own code and its own application separately, which is very important because you want to be independent and you want to run fast. And again, you need the tools in order to do that. And we want, even more importantly, to deploy separately. So it's very important that every one of the applications can deploy its own code and run fast and not be dependent in other applications. So every one of the companies can deploy its own its own application independently in other teams. So it's very important. This is an example that I stole from the post of a very naive implementation of microservice. You can see that there are 3 services, which are different 3 deployables, and there is a host. The host is the one that is rendering this page, and the host is responsible for downloading and rendering these components, these services. Basically, it can be just regular React components with some mappings and some registry. You can read about it in the post again. And in high level, this is how it's implemented. And I want to show you how it looks at Wix. So micro frontends at Wix, we have, most of you are familiar with the editor and viewer. These are the parts that you're building your site inside the editor. So it's like a drag and drop to build your website. And the viewer is just the engine that is rendering this your site. But as Yoav said, we're supplying tools to manage your website, to manage your business. So we also have a back office called Business Manager, which I will show and demonstrate about it today. And this is the place that you can manage your business. If you have a store, you can manage your products and orders. If you have a restaurant, you can manage your menu. If you're a dog walker or coach, you can handle your bookings inside. So let's see an example. Wow, it doesn't move. Yeah, no. So just a second. I plan. So this is an awesome website that has a store. So the viewer is responsible for rendering this whole thing, but the section of the store of the t-shirts is a micro frontend. Wix Stores, the company Wix Stores, is responsible for this part. And also the shopping cart that you see here, the icon and everything is another micro frontend. And if I go to the business manager, this is the place that you're managing your business. Every part here is a micro frontend. The notification bar here is a micro frontend. And every one of the links that you see here is rendering a different page, which is also a micro frontend. And the host, which is the business manager, is responsible to know which parts to load dynamically. So if, for example, I have a booking site, I will see a different micro frontends than the store. So this is a very complicated mechanism, a very complicated part of it. And in order to handle this, you need very robust tools. So this is where I'm going now to show you the tools that we had in order for developers to be able to integrate with this host very easily. So as I said, enough talking, let's see an example. So I'm doing it the opposite way. I will explain about what you will see a bit later, but I will start with an example with some code, and then I will show some more slides with examples, with explanations, sorry. So let's say that I'm a developer at Wix in one of the companies, and I want to develop a module for the business manager that we just saw. Back few years ago, I think, it was a task that took a lot of time. I had to integrate with this host, and I had to do a lot of integration. It was pretty complex. Today we have CLI, which is called Create Yoshi App. Let's call it just demo in this example. And it will let me bootstrap the application very fast. We are inspired by Create React App and Next.js. So a lot of things that you will see are inspired by these tools. It will ask me a few questions about my name, and then it will ask me which host do I live, which host will my application will rendering. So for example, it can be a business manager, or it can be a viewer application or editor application. In this case, I will choose the business manager module, which is the back office application. And what it will do now, it will integrate everything. It will do all the setup that I need to do in some, it will set up a new application in the database. It will do all the magic behind the scenes. I won't go into deeper details, but it will do a lot of setup for me. Now it will authenticate me and then do some integration behind the scenes. And now it will create a new application for me and some setup that I need. It will also create a Sentry setup for me. And that's it. Now it's just running installation. I won't wait for installation, so I have another application here, which I just created. And let's see what can be interesting here. So for start, I will go to my package.json. Can you see? Is it large enough? So for start, I will go to my package.json, and I will see that we have a tool. We call it Yoshi. I will show later on. I will show what it supply and the documentation and everything. But I can just run start. So if I just run yarn start, and it will just run my application for me. It will do all the magic to set up the integration with the host. So it will now open Wix.com, the business manager in production, and it will hook everything to render my local application inside production. So at Wix, we believe that most of the local development and even testing are working against production. So you will see that here I'm opening production. Let me hide this, sorry. So it will render the business manager, the back office application, and inside you can see my little application. So the host is automatically, the host knows to render my application because we have some overrides and some setup that we did using our tools. So the developer doesn't have to deal with all this integration and all this setup part. If we go to the project structure, you can see that we're inspired by Next.js. So for example, in order to render such a page, all I have to do is put a React component, a file with a React component inside my pages application, inside my pages folder. If I will create another folder, for example, with a different name, I will have another page. I can show you this soon. So for example, let's start by changing this to hello. And if I will save it, it is running here in watch mode. And actually it lets me, if I press 1, it will open the browser, but it's already open. And now I will be able to see that it was changed to hello. My computer is a bit slow. So again, my application, my local application is running with the real host, with real production, with some overrides. We can actually see here that we have a cookie with overrides that is dealing with all the integration. Also, we build everything accordingly. So Yoshi knows to build everything according to the host that it's in, and it's doing all the setup for us. So we won't have to deal with all the setup for the application, for the host integration, sorry. Let's see another part. Let's see how we can grab data from the host. So I want to bring some data from the host. So again, I have everything I need. I have some runtime here inside Yoshi. So I will use something called use module param. So we have a lot of hooks for runtime stuff, like translations, like monitoring, and a lot more. And if I just use it, I can have, for example, site name, and it's just that easy. I don't have to do anything else. I'm getting data from the host. So save this. And now I will probably see my site name here, which is my site too. A very nice name. So what else? Let's see how we write tests. So if I write tests, I have some ready-made component test, which will test my page, my component. So we have a test kit here, which helps us just render and interact with our component. And if I will run here Yoshi flow BM test with watch, it will run this test. And let's leave it here in the background, and we will have a nice test soon. See that the test is running and is green. Here it's just checking that the page header exists, and we'll have a test here soon for something else. So it's green. So now let's go and try something else. We don't have a lot of, we're starving to have minimum boilerplate here. So as you can see, we don't have a lot of boilerplate, and we have some kind of a zero config here. So everything is already set up in advance, and we don't want the developer to solve all the infra problems. We want all the infra problems to be solved in one place inside Yoshi. So for example, if I want to import an image, a photo here, I won't have to set up the Webpack loader and everything. Everything will be just set up here. So I can, for example, import an image. I prepared an image of Yoav here. So I can just import this image. Let's call it Yoav. So usually I'll have to set up some loaders and some stuff. Here it's just, everything is just ready for me. So I can change this to be an image with the source of and that's it basically. So we really try to have some zero boilerplate and zero config and minimal boilerplate setup here. So everything that is usually is common for all the projects will be inside our infra and not in just sitting in every one of the projects. So if I go back to my site, I will see you have here. So it's very simple. We try to give awesome developer experience. So everything is just here and ready and set up for the user. Let's try to test it now. So I can, for example, use the find by test ID. Let's put a test ID, which is actually a data hook for this image. Let's call it an image. And now I can just grab it using the data hook. And I can check that the source, for example, get attribute source. And let's so I'm just basically checking that we have an image with the source attribute of JPEG, and it's running here in watch mode. Let's just, and yes, it's green. Let's just verify. Let's put 1 here to see it failing. And, we also have an infrastructure for which we call SLED, which is used for here it failed for the. I will not show it today. We will probably have another follow-up meetup for it, which runs end-to-end tests against production, which is super cool. It's run on the cloud in parallel, and we can test our application in production using our local code that we just developed. I won't cover it here. One last thing, let's see, what if I want to write a server? So we use front-end servers to aggregate data from other microservices. So if we need data from multiple different microservices, we will write a front-end server for that, which will aggregate everything and return it for the client. And we want to do it with a great user experience and minimal boilerplate. So in order to do that, we have a tool called Yoshi server, which actually I wrote, which you can just write a function with minimal boilerplate. I will show how to do it here as well. So I can just create, let's create a greet. And it is working by convention. We have a .api file here, which is the convention. And all I have to do is write a function here, and it will run on the cloud on serverless, and we'll have type completion between client and server. And we will also be able to run and debug code in production using it, because it will run when I'm working locally, but this function will run in watch mode, will be deployed in watch mode to production for each change that I do. So I can debug issues and develop UI against production with production data. So I don't need any mocks. I don't need to mock my code, which is super, super powerful. So in order to do that, I will import a method from Yoshi. And now all I have to do is export a function. Let's call it greet. And pretty straightforward. This is all I have to do here. And this is my server. It doesn't have any boilerplate. Let's put a name here and an optional age maybe, which is a number. And let's return an object with greet. And that's it. This is my server. I don't need any boilerplate for this. And if I run this, in order to run it in production, I have to put a flag that is -- production. And from this moment on, it will, for each change that I do in my server, it will deploy this function to serverless, and my application will run using this code in production. So let's consume this code in my client. And again, we have hooks here, which supplies runtime APIs. So I need use request for that. And I can just import my function. So we called it greet. So now I can just call it. Let's do use request and call greet with some arguments. And here you will be able to see that everything is typed. So for example, greet, you see it gets a number and an optional age. And if, for example, I will put a number here, it will tell me, no, cannot put a number here. So the client-server communication is typed, which is super powerful, and the response is also typed. So if I get data from my microservices, I will get it to the client, which is also super powerful. So you can see that the data here is an object with greet, which is a string. So it's very nice to get your types from the server and to be able to see it in the client. Let's remove everything here and put data dot something is data dot greet. Wait, let's put a div first. Yeah, it will automatically. So now, if I refresh my page, I should see hello Yaniv. Yeah, and if I will look at the terminal, at the network, I will be able to see, hopefully, that the data is coming from production. So again, we try to work with production because it's super powerful. We can debug production issues this way locally. It just changes the game for developers. By the way, this is a feature which was requested by developers, and they can, for example, develop the whole UI this way with real data. They don't have to mock everything when they want to develop the UI. So that's it, I think, for this part. Did I forget? No. So one last part, which we will see in next meetups, hopefully, is LED. So I won't run it now, but we have tests which looks like Puppeteer. It's actually using Puppeteer behind the scenes, and it will just run our tests in the cloud in parallel against production. So it will open in this case, the back office in production. It will render our application like we just did and test the client and the server in production with real data, which is super powerful. So this is it for the demo. Let's go back to what was left. So we need tooling. We need great tooling to supply great developer experience. We need project scaffolding. We have hundreds of developers with tens or hundreds of projects, and we don't want each project to invent the wheel, to start everything from scratch. So as you saw before, we can just create Yoshi app in this case. It will create and generate a project according to the host that we need with everything set up. We have runtime, which helps us dealing with stuff like translations, like server-client communication, like BI, performance monitoring, and much more. And we try to reduce boilerplate and supply a great user experience. We have much more. I couldn't talk about even a small part of it because I have only half an hour. We do lint, we do CSS modules. We render pages when needed. We have a flow for full stack application, which we can just render pages in the cloud using serverless. So we have much more, which we'll hopefully be able to talk about in next meetups.